Hi everyone, I am Dana Litwin and welcome back to Tuesday Tips for Leaders of Volunteers. This week, hot topic is about paid employees, staff versus volunteers, and there can be basically three categories of attitude that paid employees have about volunteers. And that is positive, which we want to cultivate as much as possible and build on and amplify. Neutral, where they don't consider it or think about volunteers one way or the other. Maybe they're in a role or a department that doesn't interact with volunteers. They think it doesn't have anything to do with them. So you don't have to necessarily put a ton of energy into switching over neutral people. It's great if you can switch them to positive. But really, most of your energy to educate and create empathy and understanding is going to be with the staff members who have a hostile attitude towards volunteers. And there can be a lot of reasons for that. It could be something that's a current personal beef with a volunteer. It could be a past experience, even with a completely different agency where they had a bad time with volunteers or volunteering in general. So aside from solving technical things like a problem personality of a staff member, a problem personality or personality conflict of a volunteer, like those specific situations can be solved. But for these overall attitude shifts, you want to hopefully get everybody who's hostile at least to neutral, and then ideally over to positive, and that takes time. The best way to address that I have used for my clients and agencies I've worked for over the years is to have regular information flow about the positive impact of volunteers and their value, not just hourly value, but what are they really doing for mission impact? How are they really impacting and moving the needle and helping the agency to make progress in the work and the mission and the cause that you are centered around? That can help a lot. Just understanding how volunteers fit into or are the foundation of your agency, that can help a lot. So newsletters, board reports, leadership reports, all staff in-service training at least once a year, or when there's a bunch of new staff that have just been hired, things like that, kind of regularly scheduled information sharing so that everybody understands and hopefully starts to come to the understanding and shift the culture that you're all one team and these are the different parts and pieces that volunteers have and play to support the cause. The other thing to keep in mind when there's a hostile attitude is where in the agency is that coming from? Is that coming from leadership down? That's a lot harder to solve. I'll link to some other Tuesday tips that I've done about managing up and kind of helping to solve for some of leadership's misunderstanding or hostility. Or is it coming from the grassroots or lateral? Is it coming from client complaints? Is it coming from a larger issue that many agencies are facing right now with labor shortages in general of, are there just not enough volunteers, so the ones that are there are stretched really thin and getting kind of frustrated and cranky, or there's a lot of turnover? Whatever that is, when you're changing attitudes and shifting culture from hostile to at least neutral and hopefully to positive, to create that education and that empathy and that understanding, one of the first steps is figuring out where has trust been broken and where can it be rebuilt. There's always going to be certain people and personalities who just want to hang on to a grudge and be Debbie Downer and super negative or cynical about stuff all the time, and you're not their therapist and that's above your pay grade to try to be, but at least understanding like who's a real problem person or where is this toxicity coming from can help you perhaps even work with HR to get rid of that person, shift that staff member around, have them not interact with volunteers anymore at the very least. So this can be a thread that you pull that reveals a lot of other issues that you can get help with from other departments or outside consultant like myself and others. But ideally, if you just start the process of regular education and updates and mission impact beyond how many hours people worked and how many volunteers you have, because that's just dry numbers, that doesn't really tell a compelling story, then that will help build that empathy and start to shift that behavior. The components of the in-service training should include, however often you do this, I usually did this about once a year, but an all-staff training, have it recorded if possible. If some people are working remotely, then you can do a live Zoom interaction, but you want to have time to lay out the basics of your program services, why and how volunteers are important and contribute to mission impact. And then you want to have some kind of frequently asked questions and a chance for people in the room to safely share and discuss and bring up what kind of issues or problems they've had with volunteers. And you can do that with a balance of seriousness and humor. That happens to be my style. But when most people, including volunteers or paid staff or just people in general, they want to feel heard and they want to feel valued. So having a bit of a listening session built into the in-service, or just a dedicated listening session if there's been an incident, that can help quite a bit for people kind of releasing whatever built up hostility or tension that they have. And it also helps you identify who's going to need a little more time and attention, or is this beyond your scope of what you can do every day, and do you need another department's help like HR or leadership's help or board's help or an outside consultant to help come and restructure things in a way that helps to shift the culture in a more positive way between staff and volunteers. For the people who are positive and are great with working with volunteers, amplify them, amplify their voices, have them again shared in newsletters, in reports, have them speak up during the in-service training. So try to multiply, force multiply and amplify the positive voices about volunteering so that the story changes. Language is very important. If you're referring to yourself as a cat herder, and kind of even putting yourself down or saying I'm cat herding, that's not helping. So change your own language and story, help create message points, positive message points and education, little tidbits that help other staff understand, and then give those little bullet points, those little message points to the other people who are kind of already your cheerleaders and really good at working with volunteers to amplify their voices. So that's how I kind of think of Office Politics 101 when there's conflict between staff and volunteers. I'll have another segment in this little Tuesday Tips mini-series about dealing with specifically challenging coworkers. That's a kind of a whole different topic that is also unfortunately way too common. And I'm also going to link to a couple of articles that have happened fairly recently, one in late December and other, I think, last year, where staff and volunteer conflict got to the point where very, very bad things happened with the agency, or very extreme measures were taken that harmed the agency's relationship with donors, with the community, harmed the brand, and really seriously broke trust, or breakdown of trust and communication between the employees and the volunteers, have caused, newspapers to report on it. So hopefully your agency doesn't quite get to that point, but let me know in the comments below what you think, how you've solved for issues like this with staff attitudes, bad attitudes, or hostile attitudes towards volunteers. And tune in every week just about for more Tuesday tips and upcoming priceless advice interviews. Like, subscribe, hit the little bell, all that good stuff that helps the algorithm on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.